Good evening, Script Notes. Script Note special. How's everyone doing in chat? How are you all today? Or if you're watching this later, how are you all? Let me know in the comments how you're doing. I'm back here, as always, with Navian. Hi, Navian.
Hello.
And it is just Navian with me today because this is a Script Notes competition special. Been a while since we did one of these. How have you been? We didn't have you on Tuesday, but so it's been a couple of weeks since we've seen you in on this channel. How are you doing?
Tired.
Tired. Well, I hope everyone had a good festive period, a good holiday period, a good new year, and we're back with the first stream for 2023. And yeah, we're going to be talking about the scripts that we'll be playing tomorrow. Although, of course, you won't be with us for the first one. Maybe for the second. We will see. So yeah, you and I, Navian, have looked over these scripts over the last few days. And we've pulled out 6 of them that we really like, that we think do something interesting, that we think have a chance between us of being the best script or 2 scripts that we want to run tomorrow. And these are the ones we came up with. Is that fair to say?
Yeah.
Awesome. So we're going to start with a script called Intention, and we're going to run through them quickly because we've got 6 scripts to talk about today, and then obviously we've got to sort of look back through them again. But before we do talk about them, the scripts in particular, there was a good mix of scripts that use traditional one demon demons, solo demons. We had a couple of Leviathan scripts, and we had a couple of
A couple of Alhads.
A couple of Alhadikias. Leech can do pretty well by itself. And then we had a couple of scripts that use slightly less traditional demons. And we've chosen a few from each of those categories for these scripts that we're going to be discussing. And as you can see, the first one that we've got is going to be a Poe script, so that one is slightly less common as a solo demon script. What did you think about that? Did you think it was interesting? Like, for me, I thought it was interesting to see some of the things that people did with if you can hear explosions in the background, the people have just decided to set off some more fireworks right outside my house. It's fine. Did you think it was interesting to see some of the things that people did with some of the demons that usually play with their friends? See how they do by themselves, like Poe here.
Yeah, I mean that's part of why I suggested this as a thing for us to do.
Yeah. So we're not going to be giving, like, ruling anything out because it used a traditional one demon solo demon. But I think that there is something to be said for the people who have decided to make a script around a good script around one of those one of those demons that tends to rely on its allies. But yeah, here's what we've got. So yeah, let's get into talking about our first script, which is Intention. I don't know who any of these scripts are by. I've not taken a note of them. We'll figure it out.
Me neither.
Yeah, we'll figure it out when we decide who or what our favorite scripts are. I will go through and look. But for now, here is the script Intention. This was quite similar, I think, to a script that we also had that didn't quite make the cut, a script called Sudden Death. They were both Poe scripts, and they both had quite a few of the same characters. But you put this on your 6 best scripts list, and I put it somewhere near mine. So what was it that stood out to you about this script? I think that the best way that we can really talk about these scripts is to go from the demon, because, you know, the script is built around the demons. So what is it about the Poe that this script speaks to you with?
So I think, one of the things that stands out is there are multiple ways to explain a no night death, which is important when you have a Poe, right? Like, having a little bit of ambiguity of, was that a charge, or was that, are we now in a mastermind day? Was that a charge, or were they exercised? Did they hit the soldier? You even have ways to explain a double no night death, right? You could have a Poe who charged, who then got executed, and now there's a Scarlet Woman taking over, and they've chosen to charge as well on their first night of being the demon. It could have been a Poe who was executed and then or not executed, sorry, a Poe who charged and then was exercised, right? Like there's even ways to explain double nights of no death, and I think that is probably one of the things that I think is most interesting there.
Yeah, so let's go through that. A Poe charge can fail for a number of reasons on this script. You've got the Exorcist, you've got the Goon, you've got the demon was executed and it's now a Scarlet Woman or a Mastermind.
Yeah.
So yeah, there's reasons why nobody would die. There's also reasons why somebody else might die. So you can cover for those with potentially the acrobat, but more likely a gambler or a grandmother. Well, although the grandmother would require a couple of deaths. But, there are good reasons for deaths that weren't caused by the demon, and there are good reasons for a lack of deaths that should have been caused by the demon.
Yeah, so for deaths caused not by the demon, some of them are, all of them are a bit like...
traceable?
Yeah, traceable. So a Godfather death, there's no real reason for any of these, except maybe if the goon is evil and they get executed, they might stick to a claim that's not outsider. But most of these are going to be coming out as, hey, I'm dead, I'm an outsider. So you can trace a Godfather kill for the most part. An acrobat dies to its own ability, and we'll be able to trace where some of that is potentially coming from. Like, yeah, one of them is coming from possibly a poisoner, but you also have maybe a player who chose a goon. So if you have a suspected goon near an acrobat, or a player who chose a suspected goon near an acrobat, and then the acrobat dies, you might be able to find that goon. I think the one thing that the acrobat does here that might be a little townsfolky, if you will, is if the acrobat is sat near an original demon who got snake charmed, they will be able to essentially verify that his snake charming happened, which is a little bit funny and a little bit like, maybe you're a townsfolk, but acrobat can do that sometimes. So, but yeah, gambler dying to their own ability. Like some of these, if a Poe gets lucky, it might happen on a charge night, and it might throw for that day into a little bit of confusion whether it was a charge night or not. But the fact that these exist to throw a little bit of question on singular deaths, or is that a double death because we went from a Poe charge into, only hitting two players who can die and then hitting a goon or a soldier or something, right? So I think it helps a little bit.
Yeah, for sure. The Snake Charmer, of course, is actually another way that we can get to another back-to-back no deaths, but that's probably the most traceable of them all.
Probably, yeah.
Yeah, so that's what the Poe does on here, and how we think that the Poe really works. There are still flashes from outside my house. Sorry, I'm getting a little bit distracted by the fireworks that are in the park opposite my window, but that's okay. There are a few characters that I think are a little bit more I'm not sure about their position. So I always find it's really tough with solo demon scripts to put a chambermaid on them, because the demon doesn't really have a whole lot of cover. That's not entirely true here, because if you learn that somebody didn't wake up when the demon should be waking up, perhaps they were exercised that night. Perhaps they were the Scarlet Woman at that time and they're the demon now. But I do think that Chambermaid is a character that's going to be tricky to see work well on one of these scripts.
Yeah, I agree with that. The Chambermaid does stand out as being, this will probably be the one character that reliably can like solve this script. You know, again, there's a little bit of something that could help there. The Scarlet Woman in particular is probably the most helpful for the evil team in combating the Chambermaid. But like when you look at bluff cover for the Poe, there's only 2 roles on here, and that's Gambler and Exorcist that match the specific wake pattern. So if you have a Poe who got picked on night 1 and then the Chambermaid like picks them later in the game, and the numbers don't match right with whatever their claim is, like that's going to be a bit difficult to bluff around. You know, the bluff space on a single demon script is very narrow when it comes to the wake pattern. So I do agree that Chambermaid is quite strong on solo demon scripts. And I would probably be, like, if we were talking about revising scripts, I would probably tell anybody on a solo demon script, you might want to get rid of a Chambermaid.
Yeah, it's... I think another character or a pair of characters that stand out a little bit is Scarlet Woman and Mastermind. Which both serve to extend the game after the demon is executed. Of course, to be clear, in case anybody's not sure, if there are both a Scarlet Woman and a Mastermind in play and the Poe is executed, the Scarlet Woman immediately becomes the Poe and it does not become a Mastermind day because the Mastermind requires the game to end. How do you feel about having both of those characters on the script?
So normally I wouldn't particularly like it. But I think on a solo demon script, it's probably fine, especially a solo demon where no death could lead to a significant amount of death the next night. And therefore, when you're looking at like your player counts for, are we in the end game of this or not? That comes a lot sooner than other demons. So like you might be in a final 5 being like, this is potentially our last day and we have to execute the demon today or we lose. I actually was recently a Poe on a stream in that situation where the way that the deaths and the timing worked out, it was in a final 5 and I got to charge and we went to sleep with 5 and we woke up with 5 and it's just like, yeah, you just got to execute on 5 now or you lose. So I think that for a solo demon script and with a demon that can cause significant damage where players might be making those choices earlier in the game anyway with regards to, do we execute here or will that lose us the game? It might be okay, but I do think that certainly that would be something probably better answered with playtests. I'm not confident in my answer on that.
Yeah, I think I agree with you. I think it's fine here because I think that they are doing kind of the same thing, but I think it's something that you can't really have too many explanations for, right? Like, I think that the weakness of the Poe without support is it's obvious when there's going to be 3 kills, and I think that having that extra character to take away from that potential really helps out.
Yeah.
We have a Slayer on the script with a Scarlet Woman, but no Recluse or Tinker. Are you sad?
I mean, yeah, a little bit. Like, there's a Scarlet Woman. Put a Recluse. Let that Slayer kill the Recluse and make it look like a Scarlet Woman jump. Come on, it's right there.
How do you feel about making the Acrobat a Tinker for that reason and the reason that we mentioned earlier?
Yeah, I think either a Tinker or a Recluse. I see what Acrobat is doing here. It does potentially, if things line up correctly, it does help disguise where a Poe might have charged, or it adds additional deaths to a night where a charge has happened. But again, being able to trace that Snake Charming and like verify, like, that's not going to happen every time there's a Snake Charmer claim, of course, because an Acrobat might already be dead or they might not be sat in the right position to verify. But like, if it does happen, it always feels bad when an outsider is like part of what helps win it for the team because they can say, "Yeah, I believe this."
I mean, to look back over the balance document that Stephen put out a while back, he did say the idea of an outsider is that it should be a detriment to town, but a boon to town when played well. So there's
Yeah, that's fair, but I think that it's the acrobat isn't even about how the acrobat is playing their role,
true,
right?
True.
And that to me is the difference.
There are definitely worse places for an acrobat to go.
I agree with that. Yeah.
For those of you who aren't aware, I recently did Emily's the thing that Emily and Tyler posted for ranking all of your characters, and the acrobat came out as my dead last character. So a little bit biased there, but I think it's fine here. I think the odds of that situation are quite low, but I agree that situation isn't great.
Yeah.
So we got a philo on the script. Is there an obvious choice for the philosopher?
So I would say, for the reasons that we spoke about, chambermaid, if anybody sits and thinks about it, chambermaid becomes an obvious choice. But I also think that exorcist is going to be a really big draw. And there's a lot of people who like going snake charmer.
Right.
So I think that there's enough variety in what you could do with a philosopher here that even people who can see that the chambermaid might be the strongest character on this script and a solo demon script, they would probably still be tempted to go ahead and do other things anyway.
Yeah. We don't have the jinxes. No, there are no jinxes. There are no jinxes on the script.
That is correct.
That's fun. Yeah. Another issue to highlight, or a potential issue to highlight, is that we can have, I think... Can we have 3 extra evil players? I think we can definitely have 2. We've got the Goon and the Mezephiles.
Yeah, there's a Goon and a Mez.
I don't think you can have... Because the Philo... Which acts first? Philo or Poisoner? Remind me.
I believe Philo acts first.
Okay, so we can't have a Philo Goon and a Goon in the same game on the script.
Yeah. So if you're running it that if there is already a Goon in play, the Philo ends up getting Goon drunk, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the most that we can have is 2 extra evil players, but 2 extra evil players can be a little bit devastating.
It can be, yeah.
Thoughts?
Pixie Philo Goon.
Pixie Philo Goon.
Yeah,
that doesn't change anything, no.
If you have a dead Goon before the philosopher chooses to use their ability, you can end up with the double Goons that way.
Oh yeah, you're right. Yeah, you're right. You can have, in theory, up to 4 extra evil players on the script, but that's not going to happen. So,
yeah,
realistically, 2.
I would say realistically 2. Yeah, 2 is not so far off because you've got a Mez and a Goon right there. Philo and Pixie Philo Goons are a little bit more difficult to manage to work out. Like, they're possible, but less likely.
Yeah.
But I think 2 is reasonable to say that could be in play here and is also something worth looking at. I think Goon is fun and interesting with Poe for the obvious reasons that I think everybody thinks Goon is fun and interesting with Poe.
Yeah.
So I would probably look at swapping out Mez here.
Yeah, it is also worth saying that unlike in BMR, and not counting the once per game Philo, the evil team have priority on turning the Goon because the Poisoner is the first character to act. There also aren't a lot of characters that choose players each night. Or each night's asterisk. You've got Chambermaid, Snake Charmer, Gambler, and Exorcist who'll be regularly picking players for the good team. And I guess Lunatic. So I feel like that Goon is going to end up evil probably more often than they end up good, which I don't think is the case in BMR.
Yeah, so... Let's see. Okay, so how to turn a Goon evil. A Godfather who manages to hit them on a night after a different outsider was executed. a poisoner can certainly just about lock a goon in. A Poe hitting them as well, and then for our turn them good, you've got Chambermaid, which goes quite late in the night. Snake Charmer could.
Snake Charmer, Gambler, and Exorcist all act early, but not before the Poisoner.
Yeah.
Before the Poisoner, sorry, before the Poe, but after the Poisoner.
Yeah, so.
And also,
you know, if you're a Snake
also
Charmer
Huntsman.
and you don't want to become the demon, you could go you could go goon hunting and try to keep the goon good. That's pretty much it. So yeah, there's kind of like a middling amount of roles that can select a goon on either side.
Yeah, we've got so yeah, that's a possible concern. How do you feel about the other two outsiders, the damsel and the lunatic? They're quite different outsiders here.
Yeah, so I think damsel is one of those that's kind of like you can put this in most scripts and it's just fine as an outsider. The fact that it's a Poe means that actually there's a stronger chance that the damsel is just going to end up like dying in the night on accident, or at the very least, it's probably going to be potentially a shorter game so that the damsel doesn't have to hold on to it quite as long. Lunatic. Yeah, I think lunatic is fine here. Again, especially with like Scarlet Woman or Mastermind. So even a lunatic who's just like, if they get executed and die, and then there's a night of no death, and like, but the game is continuing, or even if there is a night of death, as long as it's not a night of like an obvious triple Poe kill, you know, a lunatic could believe, oh, maybe I had a Scarlet Woman, oh, maybe I had a Mastermind, right? So I think that those two are fine.
Yeah. We've got three characters at the top of the script, three start knowings that all kind of, depending on how you play the noble at least, but generally tend to confirm good players, which is, I think, quite a lot. I don't think it's too much, but I think it's a fair bit. What do you think about that? Grandmother and Pixie in particular both kind of fill a similar role.
Yeah, I agree. They're both about confirming another living good player. One specifically a townsfolk, one could be an outsider. But yeah, I think that they definitely sort of fill a similar niche. And generally, I prefer scripts that would spread that out a bit more.
There's also, I think that the strongest play with the Philo actually is to go Philo Grandmother on the second night. I think that is the quote-unquote optimal play with the Philo.
I'm not sure I would consider it the optimal play, but it is definitely a play that I would know would be high up on several people's like list of things to do.
Yeah, it brings benefits. It brings only benefits, really. But yeah, that's Intention. I think it's a pretty good script. And yeah, I think it's a pretty good script. Not a perfect one, but I don't think any of these scripts will be perfect scripts because it's really fucking hard to build a perfect script, and we only gave people like 3 weeks. Yeah. So, and also a restriction. So let's. Is there anything else you want to say about this one? We've got the soldier and the sage, which both want to get targeted. How do you feel about sage actually, as opposed to the other options for soldier and sage, as opposed to the other options that want to get targeted?
I mean, so without a Vortox on the script, right, they're sure that one of the players that killed. To be fair, there is a poisoner. They could have been poison killed, yeah. But most of the time, they are going to trust that their information is good. If that happens very early in the game, that's probably going to lead to a very short game because you have time to kill the two pings. If it's late in the game, you might not have time to kill both because, again, Poe is, their specialty is killing extra people. They get an average of 1.5 kills, per night if they're doing a charge kill. So, they might not have time to get both of them if you hit that sage later on. So I'm kind of on the fence about it. I think maybe a different role would be better here since there's very limited ways for misinformation, but it's okay.
Yeah, I like to pair Sage with Vortox and Ravenkeeper with anything else, but I do think that the speed of the game, 1.5 kills a night as opposed to 1 kill a night, means that isn't as necessary here. Yeah, cool. Anything else you want to talk about here?
Nope.
All right, then let's move on to our second script that we're going to talk about today, which is Oops All Drunks. And I think that you rated this one quite a bit higher than me. So do you want to talk about why you like this script so much? It's an imp script, so, but I think this is the one script that we're really going to be talking about today, where the demon isn't the main focus. Not to say it's not important, but I don't think it's the main thing on the script.
Well, what stands out, so okay, a lot of times you might see on custom scripts people really just absolutely maxing out their like sources of misinformation and drunkenness and poisoning, but that will include several evil roles as well. And the issue that I have with those scripts is generally that those are it gets to a point where your poisoning and drunkening is completely untraceable and it becomes just an absolute mess, and there's really very little chance for the good team to sort it out. Now, to be fair, like those can make for great scripts that are based on social plays, right? If all of your information is just completely unreliable, then you have to lean hard into, okay, well, socially, what do I think is going on in this game? But a lot of people play this game because we like a certain amount of the puzzle aspect, and when the puzzle becomes so convoluted and so polluted that you can't do anything with it, it kind of doesn't always feel great. So what stands out to me on this script is, though, yes, there is a significant amount of drunkenness and poisoning. It's all coming from the good rolls here. There's not a it's all drunkenness. There's no poisoning.
Apart
None of the
Charmer.
evil rolls. Well, whatever. Anyway, none of the evil roles do any of the misinformation beyond their usual form of I am just an evil player who is lying here. To be fair, it is difficult to certainly trace a lot of this drunkening, and that is sort of, the point of drunkening and poisoning is that it's not that easy to trace. But, you do have there's not a whole lot of outsider manipulation here either, which means that it's going to be pretty not impossible, but like pretty easy to tell if, oh, we're missing an outsider, so maybe we just have the drunk here. A puzzle master is going to come out as a puzzle master and going to be working to solve their ability. Sweetheart is going to be able to say, hey, I'm dead now, one player is drunk. The sailor and the innkeeper can tell you who they chose. And I mean, if a snake charmer hit happens, you're probably hearing about it. Unless the snake charmer was turned evil by the meds, I guess. But
sure.
So, I think that in terms of scripts that are attempting to do that are attempting to sort of increase the drunkenness and the misinformation, it's nice to see for once a script that doesn't max it out in both good and evil and make it just a convoluted mess. At the very least, this offers some traceability here.
I do agree with that. And I do think that this is a good script to talk about for that reason. But there are still some issues that aren't even related to that, or at least not directly, that I do want to bring up. In particular, there are some characters in Clock Tower that if they are transitionally drunk, it's quite hard to treat them as drunk and make their abilities not work, because it's going to be obvious that they're drunk, and that can, when the drunkenness is coming from good players, that can often confirm those players. And this script has a couple of them. It has the dreamer and the empath in particular. If the sailor picks the empath, for instance, and they've been getting zeros all game, and suddenly they get one night of a 1 and then they're back to zeros, you're kind of confirming a couple of people there.
You can, which is why I think that it's important to remember that just because a player is drunk, it doesn't guarantee that they're going to get false information. They're going to get whatever you think is like going to be most misleading at the time for that player. So I think that is something that would be important to keep in mind if you are to run a script like this.
I also think that there are other potential risks on the script. In particular with the drunkenness that the storyteller might choose to put on a player for one night and then leave. Like, I can quite easily see a situation where the poppy grower and a minion get picked by the innkeeper, and then either the poppy grower gets executed or assassinated, and fuck you, evil team.
Yeah.
I think that there are a lot of characters on the script which are just a little bit too powerful for me. In particular, the Dreamer, the Empath, and the Gossip. I really like the choice of minions on the script. I think that they go really well with the Imp, and I think they go really well with the theme of the script.
I do agree that Gossip in particular is going to be a little bit strong here. Like, the only thing that they have to cause an extra death from the evil team, right, is the Assassin, which means, like, you can disguise yourself as a Gossip once, which, to be fair, is maybe all you need. But yeah, if you have an actual Gossip and they get more than one kill, that just hard proves them. So I do agree that this script does have some amount of potential for that hard confirmation that might be difficult for evil to play around in a couple of spots.
Yeah, I think that the Moonchild is also supposed to do a similar thing, but I'm not really sure it does.
Yeah.
I think the Moonchild Assassin combo really works on BMR largely because of the presence of the Mastermind. I think is an interesting combination. Not to say that it doesn't work without it, because you can still quote unquote confirm your imp that's just been executed and passed to the Scarlet Woman, despite the fact that they've got there's no fortune teller, but info pointing at them as being evil.
Yeah.
But I think it's going that sort of situation is going to be fairly rare. That the Moonchild is a huge detriment to the good team, because also you can kind of,
I can agree with that.
You can also kind of play around it here where you can't on a script like BMR, because on BMR, if the Moonchild gets executed in the mid game, oops, no, that wasn't the mid game. It's been a poe charge and you've just lost.
Right. Yeah.
That can't happen here.
Yeah, for sure. I do think that Moonchild stands out as like probably the outsider that I would swap out for something else.
Recluse makes the Empath weaker.
It also can mess with the Dreamer, it can mess with the Noble, it can mess with the Clockmaker. There's a reason that I advocate for Recluses on a lot of customs.
I agree with you. I do agree with you. I think
in terms of the townsfolk, like Washerwoman is really strong here because they have no spy to ping off of and no spy that they could be to put a little bit of question into that. Like, the only thing that could happen is you started off the game as either the drunk or the puzzle master drunk, and depending on what the ST does with that could become quite obvious.
Yeah. I think Clockmaker and Mazephiles should be a much worse combination than it is, but people don't out them as Mazephiles, so it's fine.
Well, yeah, because everybody want to be turning evil.
I love how much of the game is built on the assumption that sometimes people want to be good and they're just not.
The thing is that there are some people who are like that, and it's just they people who are mezzes, they learn real fucking quick who those people are, because they'll make the mistake once and never again.
Yeah.
And as a result, the rest of the group also learns that. If you have a player who's added a Mazephiles, anybody else in the future who pulls a Mez token goes, ooh, I remember when that person outed this other Mez, so let's not go to them. And the more stable a group is, the more that is going to happen.
Yes, Ed.
Yeah, Ed's outed a Mez before. He's in the unreliable list.
We've got both Innkeeper and Monk on the script. Does that raise any alarms, as well as Sailor, but to a lesser extent?
Yeah, I do think that those are redundant and you don't really need them. The Monk you're safe from the Demon, and the Demon here can only kill a player, and the Innkeeper is you can't die. So, like, there's no need to have them both. They do essentially the same thing, except the Innkeeper protects 2 players and Drunks 1, where Monk is just protecting. Like, I definitely think that is covering the same territory and doesn't need to.
Yeah, the Innkeeper can also block a Moonchild kill or tell the Gossip to go somewhere else.
Right, exactly. Whereas the Monk can't. So I think that one of those would need to be swapped out for something as in the refining process of this script.
Yeah. I do think it's a good script to talk about, because it's because it each shows how you do lots of drunkenness on a script well. But I think that there's just a couple of things that for me just take it a little bit below the standard that I would be looking for. But we will discuss exactly where it's how it compares to the others in an hour or two. Is there anything else that we've missed? We've not really spoken about the Amnesiac. What would you do with an Amnesiac here?
I think the biggest obvious thing that probably most people would be immediately drawn to is to help with tracking that the drunkenness, because yes, the sailor and the innkeeper can tell you who they picked, and that can be super tracked, but a drunk, a puzzle master, and a sweetheart, they can't tell you who is drunk exactly. They know that somebody is, and part of the puzzle master's ability is trying to solve which one was from there specifically, but they can't, that's the ST knows that one. So that would be the obvious one, which means that personally I would probably stay away from it unless I thought I came up with some unique way of tracing drunkening that isn't just the obvious, because I think it's too obvious. But I do think that is there as an option and certainly would be helpful.
Sure. Emma points out in chat that Clockmaker and Noble can be a little bit rough, depending on the exact setup that you've got. It can be okay. It doesn't point straight at a demon because there will be, depending on how exactly the seating works, potentially 6 people that meet the Clockmaker's number from the Noble pings. But yeah, it can be not great. That's most of the characters that we've spoken about then. One more thing, actually. How do you feel about the role combination of Town Crier with Imp?
It's pretty good for the good team, because the Imp specifically can turn any minion into the demon. So, that's one of the things about the Imp is that you can't just go, oh, we believe this player is a minion, so we can just leave that alone and then just let somebody live as a minion till the end of the game, necessarily, on the idea of we have to go after demon candidates, because the reality is that minion is also a demon candidate. So I think being able to track the minions is quite strong for the good team, and quite helpful for them to be able to narrow down who could be the demon. They might not be the demon now, but who could be later, and how much do we need to keep that in mind?
Yeah. The evil team don't have any direct ways to push back on that, but of course the Mezephiles will always be there to, just slightly corrupt one piece of information for the whole game. Yeah. Also, Witch, Town Crier, pretty natural combination. Town Crier goes, hey, would you mind nominating, please? Yeah, sure, I nominate. You're dead.
Yeah.
Oh, hello, Town Witch.
Indeed.
But yeah, I think it's a pretty solid script. We'll come back to it later. Let's move on to our third script if there's nothing else you want to bring up.
No.
2-for-1 special with the Shabaloth. So I suppose we can. This is one where we can really start with the Shabaloth and work our way up the script. Again, this is one that I think you had a little bit higher than me. Oh no, I quite
gave
like this
you
one.
my list in no particular order, so please stop ordering mine.
I'm not trying to order yours. I'm just saying this wasn't in my very top. I'm not sure exactly. You sent me 6 is what happened. Yeah.
And I said these are in no particular order.
You did. I've actually checked over my notes, and 2-for-1 special I put higher than I remember it being. It is actually in my top 6, but that's okay. So yeah, Shabloth script. What do we like about this with the Shabloth?
Some of the similar reasonings as with the postscripts that we went over. You got a couple of reasons why a Shabaloth might miss. You've got an innkeeper, you've got a goon, you've got a soldier. So there's things that sort of are balancing out the fact that the Shabaloth is killing at a higher rate than other demons generally do. And you also have a small amount of abilities that can sort of potentially cover up for if that were to happen, like a Godfather killing after an outsider, or a Tinker death, just dying on the spot. You do have a Gossip, which I think is a little bit more sustainable on a Shabaloth script than it might be on other demon types, because the Shab does regularly kill. Although I think with a solo demon script and a Gossip, you're always going to potentially suffer the same thing of a Gossip just being able to hard prove themselves by gossiping true things a couple of times. But in a game with a Shabaloth, where again the kill count is higher, you might not have the opportunity to do that because you might run out of days where gossiping is a good idea.
Yeah. This script has the role combination of Shabloth and Goon, and this actually brings up a question that I want to ask you, because it's something that happened in a game I ran quite recently on a Sunday stream, and I want to check that you agree with how I ran it, which is that the Shabaloth resurrects a player, and then it kills 2 players, right? The demon was a Shabaloth, and they decided to pick the same 2 players that they picked the night before to simulate whatever it was they wanted to simulate. They wanted nobody to die, basically, and nobody to get resurrected. Okay. But one of those players was the Goon, and I had pre-decided that the Goon was going to be resurrected. And I don't know what should happen there. The way that I ran it was that the Goon was resurrected and immediately turned evil. I can also see an argument that the Goon was dead when the Shabaloth selected, so they should just die because they weren't selected at the point where they had an ability. I don't know how I feel about that one.
I agree with how you ruled it. At the moment that the storyteller decides, which is right before the demon chooses, at the moment that the storyteller decides this player is coming back alive, they are back alive, which means that the moment that they are chosen, that Goon is turning evil, the Shab is drunk, and then nothing else happens after that. So
yeah, that was how I also put it together. But that's such an unlikely thing that we don't really need to consider that.
Yeah.
I just wanted to see what you thought. There are a few characters that I think are a little bit not what I would want on the script, but there are also some characters that I think are really interesting on the script. So like you say, the Gossip, usually not great on solo demon scripts, but such a quick game, do you want to take that risk? I think that I always love a spy, but I think that the spy here can be is also interesting because it works against a couple of the other characters. It works against the Undertaker, as it does on TB. It works against the Washerwoman in multiple ways. And it helps.
The Balloonist, the Oracle, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh my god, a spy resurrected by a professor.
Yes, spy resurrected by a professor. Always love to see that. There are a couple of characters that... also, you got the spy damsel Jinx, which fun. I like spy magician. I think that's interesting. And I like the minions in general, to be honest. I think that Godfather with damsel can give the evil team quite a bit of information, particularly in a low outsider count. Because if the Godfather's been woken up a couple of times, then they might be like, okay, let's not bother guessing. But if they've not been woken up at all, they know that there's almost certainly, well, that either the damsel is killed by the demon or there is still a damsel alive.
For sure, yeah.
Which I think is quite an interesting combination.
I also think so spy and damsel are hard jinxed against each other, that only one can be in play, and I think that there's a lot of reason to not like hard jinxes on a script together, because there's a reason most of the time that they're not allowed and play together, and it's because it's just fucking awful. Whereas one of the few, if not the only ones that I like, are the Spy Widow jinx with the damsel, and that is specifically because if somebody is thinking that there is a spy in the game and you're the damsel, you know for sure that there is not a spy in the game, but you cannot actually press on that too hard without giving yourself away. So for at least a portion of the game, you need to suppress that information and just let people go off on this world where, like, they're hard thinking that there's a spy in the game because maybe the demon just got some really lucky picks, or maybe they had some hard claims that they trusted and believed in and were like, yeah, I'm fucking killing that. I think that this is one of the few times where I find a hard no jinx to actually create a very interesting and unique sort of tension.
Yeah, I think we've spoken about this before, but I think I like it more with Widow, just because you've got that one person saying, I know that there's a Widow in this game, and that one other person saying, like, fuck there is, mate, but also not saying that. But it's I still like it, yeah. The character that gives me the biggest pause for concern is the balloonist.
Okay.
It's a Shabaloth script with a godfather and a witch. I think that balloonist is very, very, very unlikely to get their info.
Yeah, I mean, there's also a poisoner and a spy that can mess with it too.
Also true.
I
think I would be a sad balloonist on this script, and I think that
possibly,
yeah,
maybe you have a nice professor who resurrects you.
Yeah, but then you get your info all over again, and it's meaningless.
Well, it's only if the storyteller decides to do that. They could give you a break and show you a different type than what you'd had from before.
They could, but the problem is you don't know if they've done that.
That's true. You don't know, and there's no way to actually tell.
Yeah. So even if the storyteller gives you 4 pieces of information, and they are one of each type, you don't know that.
I would probably swap a balloonist out for something else here as well.
It's not like it needs the outsider manipulation either, because there's a godfather.
Right, yeah. That's something else that people like to, when I talked earlier before about people maxing out, like drunkening and poisoning to the point where it's just too much. You don't really need it, right? Like, look at any given script, and there's really, like, maybe, like, 2 sources in a base script of, like, drunkening and poisoning. There's the drunk and the poisoner. There's... you've got a Vortox, sort of, that just causes a bunch of misinformation, but that makes it traceable. Or you've got a Nodashi and a Sweetheart. Maybe a Snake Charmer, but that's sort of a self-contained poisoning as opposed to poisoning somebody else. So, like, I'm not really counting that. In BMR, like, okay, you've got a sailor and you've got the innkeeper. And again, the minstrel just drunks everybody, and it generally becomes a little bit more noticeable. So, like, there's BMR is slightly different. So, like, a lot of those are either very limited amounts or very traceable. And when you combine, like, a whole bunch of both, you end up with a mess. But, like, I think the same can be said of some amounts of outsider manipulation, right? Each of the base scripts really only has one source at any given time. It is the Baron, it is the Godfather, or it's one of the demons, because you can't have multiple starting demons. So it's either a Fengu or a Vigor, but not both. And when you get into customs, people often max out their outsider manipulation to the point where, like, sometimes that is the point of a script, and I think that can be done with a certain amount of delicacy. But sometimes it's just, oh, I'm going to put this. Hi, where did you lose me at? Well, I don't remember what I was saying there, but basically I'll just repeat what I said at the end, which is that, I think there's a lot of people when they're making customs who are going like, oh, I need all this outsider manipulation, and in reality, you don't. You really only need one source most of the time. Anything beyond that, it can work. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying don't add multiple outsider manipulations. You can. That can definitely work, but you don't need to. There isn't like some imperative that you put multiple sources of outsider manipulation on. The base scripts only have one each, and that works for them.
And always with a window of 2, I like to say.
Yeah.
But yeah, not sure the balloonist is completely necessary here. What else have we got? Yeah, Emma points out that while you can't have a spy and a damsel, what you can have on the script is a spy and a drunk huntsman.
True.
Which is fun. How do you feel about the poisoner figuring out who their demon is in a magician game by poisoning one of them?
That is definitely a choice that they can make. It's not a choice I personally would be making, but it is a choice.
Yeah, fair. All right, let's talk about the goon, because the goon is always an interesting one to look at. What picks a goon here? So for the evil team, we've got Godfather occasionally, Poisoner, Witch, Serenovus, and Shab. So most of the minions can turn a goon.
Yeah.
Or most of the evil team can turn a goon. On the good team, you've got Lunatic,
Innkeeper,
once per game, the Professor and Seamstress, and Huntsman.
Only once.
And Ravenkeeper, only once.
And Ravenkeeper, only once. And that is pretty much it, yeah.
Reliably, you're looking at the Innkeeper.
Yeah. Which means that most of the time your goon is probably going to be evil, and they're probably going to stay evil.
Yeah. Which is a bit of a concern. It's not the biggest, because there are no other characters that can turn evil. But it's a bit of a concern.
Yeah.
Although a Ravenkeeper picking the goon and seeing the Ravenkeeper is hilarious.
That's true.
Yeah, so yeah, there's your goon warning of the script. What else do I have in my notes?
Yeah, I would probably swap the balloonist out here for something on the good team that can also make a choice, so that it's maybe a little bit more evened out for the goon.
How would you feel about a pacifist on the script with something like EA as well? How would you feel about going down that route?
I mean, it feels like that's not the route that this script wants to go down, so I think they would have gone down that if they wanted to go down that, and they didn't. So
yeah, I feel like it's interesting. I just really like the character combination of pacifist and professor. Obviously, the professor can resurrect a spy, so it's not like the guaranteed, oh, we're confirming a whole bunch of people here. But I think that the professor is generally quite well positioned to just resurrect whoever dies first. Now, there are a lot of reasons why outsiders would die on this script early. The goon might want to, damsel certainly wants to, and the drunk doesn't know. But with a quick game, with a Shabloth, the highest kill rate demon of them all, aside from potentially Al-Hadikia, and a Godfather on the script, maybe the outsiders don't want to die. That's kind of a push in the other direction.
Right, yeah.
How much do you want to die if you're a damsel on the script?
I think early game, certainly you have a strong incentive to probably die early, because if there's a Godfather kill, you're doing it maybe early enough on that it's not going to be absolutely devastating. But if you survive until halfway through the game, you're probably in a really tough position where part of you wants to die, but you explicitly want to die in the night as opposed to being executed.
How do you feel about the Oracle here? The Oracle, the demon isn't going to want to kill its minions, although it can, to get them to be resurrected, and Shabloth arguably should be doing that more.
I agree, yeah.
But there's also, you've also got the spy to mess with it a little bit, but generally speaking, it is going to be, again, broadly tracking who dies in the night, because even if they do even if the Shabloth does eat a minion and they get spat out, the Oracle will probably notice, unless the other
Right,
minion
yeah.
gets executed the day after.
Yeah, I do think that Oracle kind of sticks out a little bit here. The Oracle is more or less doing what I think the Undertaker is kind of doing, which is sort of checking like what you're doing with your executions this game, because there is little to no reason to kill your own minions other than to just like fuck with whatever town is thinking, or maybe to resurrect them. But again, a lot of Shabs don't do that. I agree with Emma that like the Oracle confirming a minion res is pretty funny, but it also seems like incredibly strong information in the game, perhaps a little too strong. So I might be looking at swapping out Oracle for something else, or maybe changing one of the. You're going to hear it again, folks. Change one of the outsiders to a recluse to mess with the Oracle.
I don't like that, but
yeah, so I would probably also suggest maybe swapping out the Oracle for something else here, because I think that it's not really doing anything that the Undertaker isn't already doing, and it does it in a whether it does it in a more or less interesting way. Like right now, the only thing that can mess with the Oracle number is the spy. I think that probably, again, there's a poisoner. They could mess with it that way, but probably only one of Oracle Undertaker is needed. The other can be something else.
If you are the Oracle, and you do discover that a minion has just been resurrected by the Shabloth, how likely are you to want to push on that though? Because you do know that on this script that minion can never become the demon. There's no Scarlet Woman. There's no imp.
So that's the thing about the resurrection as we currently have it, is anybody who is dead and then revived, you probably just can leave it alone. Some of these minions can be pretty devastating and quite hard to deal with even late game. A Godfather being able to get extra kills, but you can somewhat avoid that by not killing your outsiders, or at least the ones that can come out or will come out. A poisoner can mess with info, but if you're at the point in the game where there's a regurgitation happening, I'm not sure how much more the poisoner will end up doing for the evil team. I mean, it could be devastating. It could not be. It depends on who they hit exactly when. Hard to say. A witch shuts off at 4, and a Cerenovus is... A Cerenovus can be difficult to deal with late game, but again, it can be gotten around, and I find that a lot of the times it is gotten around by late game, where when they Cerenovus a player who is already pretty well trusted and already been open to a lot of people about what their claim is, people will naturally sort of not push on the player who's mad because they shouldn't and they know it, but also still be taking into account that player's actual information without actually saying it, right?
Yeah.
So if you have a minion regurgitation here, I would say most of the time you probably would leave it alone, because you're right, they can't possibly be or become the demon, which is why I want like a demon who interacts with resurrection at some point in the future, but that's not a discussion for this script.
I think that you also need to be as always wary that you don't get into a situation where you've just got too many living evil players to have a chance to win the game.
Yeah, that's always a potential risk, right? Especially, again, you have a goon on here, so you could have an extra evil.
Okay. So I think for this script, I would definitely remove the balloonist. I would definitely add some more townsfolk that choose players in the night, or remove the goon. Probably the first one, because I do like goon in the context of the Shabloth, but
yeah,
in general. I would probably remove the Undertaker and the Professor personally, but I don't think this script is that bad.
Yeah, I see reasons for removing a Professor. I think that it's very difficult to have a script with a Professor that does not also have a Shabaloth, but it is it's much easier to have a Shabaloth script without a Professor. Yeah.
Okay. Anything else you want to bring up here?
Nothing in particular.
Yeah, we touched on the minions a little bit. We touched on most of the townsfolk. We've got the pixie washwoman, who also see discussion for pixie grandmother. Do you think that's okay here?
I think that it falls into the same thing as Pixie Grandmother, where it's like these are sort of covering the same bases. They're both looking to verify specific townsfolk in slightly different ways. Both of them have a spy that they could ping off of, so that balances them out a little bit. But in terms of what the roles are actually doing themselves, they definitely have a lot of crossover.
All right. Yeah, so we've got a couple of that type of thing, right? We've got Pixie Washwoman and we've got Oracle Undertaker, so that's probably a couple of the things of note here. Yeah, let's move on to our next script. Actually, one more thing. How do you feel about Tinker? Because the Tinker usually on BMR is there to cover throw a little bit of a spanner in the works, as it very much were, about which demon is in play.
Right.
That's not going to happen here. It can still cover for a goon, and it can still feed a godfather.
Also, which Tinker is funny.
Which Tinker is funny. That is true. All right, you convinced me. Let's move on. Turncoats. This, I think, is this the one that I wanted to talk about that you didn't put in your top?
Yeah, I had this one like just outside of that.
All right. So I'll take a lead on this one then. This is a Fangu script, where the Fangu only script, where the Fangu is the only source of outsider modification, which is interesting. But I think on this script, the reason that can work, there's no Sentinel leader. The reason that can work is because the outsiders aren't going to want to claim to be outsiders, even if it's final 3 and they've not been jumped, because everyone's just going to be like, okay, but how do we know you've not been jumped?
Yeah.
And that kind of, that interests me. We've got the Widow, which can help the Fangu to find their jump. The Marionette, I always love a Marionette. And I think that there are a lot of reasons why good players would claim to be the Goblin, not just the Cerenovus, which, everybody loves that jinx. I think that,
for sure,
and I have to take a little bit of the responsibility for this, but I think that there is getting to be a bit more of a meta of mutants claiming to be the Goblin because it's funny. And in fairness, it is very funny. But also, I think that there are reasons why some of these townsfolk get pretty strong info. Like the soldier can't die at night. So, like in this script, there's no way for the soldiers to die at night unless they're widow poisoned. So the soldier can pretty much guarantee themselves to be in final 3 just by claiming to be the Goblin and nothing else. Whether that's something that they would want to do, because they might look suspicious as all hell by final 3, but they can, if they wanted to, they could guarantee themselves that influence in the late game. Fortune tellers, mathematicians, and oracles and savants are going to be getting super powerful information. The savant can broadly trust their information unless there's been a widow ping.
Right.
There's not a whole lot of false info in the game, but you are going to end up with one extra evil player. So I think that kind of balances itself out. You've got one fewer townsfolk and one extra evil in the game compared to a normal game. So even with the good team getting basically correct info, I think that kind of balances itself out. And I think that's the case in SMV as well, because the Fangu is the only demon in SMV that doesn't cause any misinformation directly. But it's also the demon that I think most people will consider to be the strongest in the script. And there's no direct misinformation coming from the minions on that script either. So I think this is quite an SMV adjacent script. I would have liked. Normally, I'm not a huge fan of Fangu Drunk, but I think it would have been interesting here. I think that the townsfolk that we've got on the script work quite well with the Fangu. You've got the fortune teller which also does have the recluse to mess with it, but it can it's also a script where you might not want to ping the recluse as the demon to the fortune teller, because they might be the demon later. You've got the snake charmer who can confirm people only for them to become no longer confirmed, because it's literally a day later. You've got I think that the good team on here are pretty well designed to find a Fangu, but also have that inbuilt, okay, but that's not actually the Fangu aspect. And I think there's also quite a bit of storyteller control in that. Like, there's a lot of powerful characters on the script: the chef, the snake charmer, the fortune teller. But the nature of the Fangu, I think, builds in a little bit of a vulnerability to them. You, like I said, didn't rank this as quite as highly as I did. You still liked the script, of course, but
yeah.
What was it about this script that made you take pause?
I'm not gonna lie, there was another Fangu script that is very similar that I just liked more than this. So that's how that happened.
Okay.
Like, I'm not saying that this is a bad script by any means, but I think the other script, which we will be looking at, is a little bit more interesting and shares a lot in common with this one. And those things that it shares in common are good things. Like, don't get me wrong, but you know, if I have two, when I was looking at the scripts, two scripts that had the same demon, part of how I was sorting it was, which of these do I like more? Because, like, you know, I didn't want us to end up with just like 4 or 5 Fangu scripts to be talking about, or I mean, we didn't have that many Fangu scripts, but like that, when you have a solo demon scripts, it is difficult to not directly compare it to other solo of the same type of demon scripts that you know were in the pool, right? To look at them and be like, so which of these do I like better than the other? And you know, have that influence some of the weighting in the sorting.
Okay, well, let's talk about the script as we've got it up here. I think that the other Fangu script that you refer to is the next one that we're going to be talking about. Yeah. But for now, we've got this one. This one has the farmer, which of course you love. I think that the farmer and the soldier baiting Fangu kills by pretending to be an outsider is fun. I don't remember exactly what was on the next script that we talk about, apart from the obvious. But yeah, what are the interactions on here that you maybe don't like quite as much as we got in the other one, or is it all a case of the next one they're all great? Is that more the sort of thing that's
yeah, that's more the sort of thing. I mean, as Molobak has pointed out, like Savant in here is going to be particularly strong. Unfortunately I have seen how much damage a chef noble can potentially do in a game. When you have that chef 2 and a noble ping, that is not drunk or poisoned, and so you have to give him a real thing. To be fair, this one does combat some of that with a recluse on the script, and that can mess with either chef or noble, but oof, that can be devastating.
All right. Well, I hadn't planned to do this, but how about we bring up the next script that we want to talk about and then put them side by side?
If you would like. I think we maybe shouldn't, but
okay, no, that's fine.
Like that's just, you asked about my personal, like how I was ranking them, and so for me, that aspect of it came into some of how I decided to choose what went into like my top picks. But I don't think that means they should necessarily be compared side by side.
Fair enough. Yeah, I think the other advantage that a Fangu only script has in combating a chef noble is that the Fangu's probably already gone by the time that they figure out who it is, and good players next to noble pings are not unlikely to be killed in the night just randomly. Mm-hmm. So I do think that the script has good opportunities for both teams here. It's also a Butler script. We've got to love Butler scripts.
Indeed.
As
Molobak said when this came up, it has Butler, big W.
I do agree that the Savant is quite powerful. I agree that the Soldier is quite powerful. The Mathematician is an interesting one, because that is checking not checking a whole lot. It's checking Recluse, Puzzle Master, and Widow, and I think that's it, isn't it? It doesn't check Marionette.
Yes, yeah, because Marionette's failing to its own ability,
Yeah.
so it would be Widow, Puzzle Master, Recluse, and nothing. I guess. Nope. Snake Charmer's to its own self. Never mind.
Doesn't check Snake Charmer.
Yeah. So yeah, just those three.
Yeah. So
which means I think that math here has very limited appeal, and would maybe be better as something else.
Yeah, I can agree with that. Before we do move on to the next script, then, and we might come back to this one, just kind of not as a comparison necessarily, but sort of as a, because you mentioned the other script and saying that this is what it's got a little bit more that you like. So maybe we can talk about what this one has got going for it instead, or what the other one doesn't do, or what this one does do, or what this one doesn't do that the other one does do. If there's nothing else that you want to talk about specifically relating to this script.
Snake Charmer, Recluse, yes, but don't.
Yeah, of course. I would like to hope that the author of this script knows better than to do that. And I hope that other people running this script, yes, but don't.
Juggler juggling the Recluse as 5 evil things, and gets a juggler 5.
Number.
Yeah, then you get any number. But, just give him a 5, right?
Oh, why not? I would like to. Yeah, actually, that's a good point. I think that that the juggler can be quite powerful on a solo demon script because they only need to juggle one demon. Yeah. That again,
sure.
That's mitigated by it being a Fangu. But the good team can quite easily get lucky there.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's very little room for misinformation in that, right? Like, you can give him misinformation if one of the players they juggled was the Recluse. Obviously, if they were Widow poisoned, or if they're Puzzle Master drunk. But other than that, like, there's kind of not a lot of wiggle room there. So yeah.
Do you think there's a case being made that the Recluse claiming to be the Recluse early on the script is almost the best way to play it, like almost optimal? Because it means that a juggler is less likely to juggle you, an oracle will know to be aware of you, a fortune teller should be aware not to pick you. But that, of course, comes at the cost of it's a Fangu script. So do you think that's an interesting
I think most likely here is yes, the Recluse is pretty incentivized to come out because there's a lot of roles that might already read them as evil and then later on they become actually evil. But it's difficult, right? Because if you come out as a Recluse later on, you can point out that you had that inbuilt excuse, but that doesn't stop you from being a demon candidate anyway. You can come out early and get yourself executed and then fuck the Oracle, I guess, but at least all the other roles are, it's definitely going to be a bit tricky for a Recluse specifically, which is fine. I think it should be, right? Outsiders are meant to be a hurdle to overcome, and how you want to overcome it in this particular script is quite tricky on, as it will be on any solo Fangu script.
Yeah. The Recluse does feel like it's in a bit of a damned if you do position, but
But that's how I like my Recluses.
The only question to ask there is how fun is it? Because it can be interesting for the other players, but is it interesting for that player? And for some people the answer to that will be yes, fair. And to some people the answer to that will be no. I think that's another question of know your group.
Fair enough, yeah.
All right, is there anything else here? Really? The General and the Oracle, and arguably even the Fisherman, can be used to detect a jump.
For sure.
And the Savant, of course.
Yeah, the Savant whenever the storyteller wants to.
Yeah.
But I do like Fangu Farmer. I think that they're a decent combo because anytime that there's a farmer, a straw pass, if you will, or a claim of a straw pass, everybody has to ask themselves, like, ooh, was that a legit farmer or was that a Fangu who's just jumped and is now like trying to cover the person that they jumped to? Or and certainly an Oracle could help sort that out some. But at the same time, maybe it can't, depending on exactly when it happens, right? If town is pretty sure that they just executed an evil player and the oracle's number at night is just a 1, and then there's a claim of a farmer jump happening, you know, you have to sort out, did we actually execute an evil player, or was that the Fangu jumping? So I do think that there's certainly some interest there. Like I'm a fan of Fangu farmer, or really Fangu in anything that like wants to die in the night, like Raven Keepers as well. You know, they have their own strengths that they could do on a Fangu script with that claim.
What we're saying is
Sage, but I wouldn't recommend Sage here.
What we're saying is you like farmer. You like characters that get killed in the night.
Yeah, but I like them as paired with demons that have a reason to die in the night, like a Fangu or an Imp.
Yeah. I think... How do you feel about it's night 2, night 3? The game isn't going in any particular direction. It's a two outsider game. The Fangu hasn't jumped yet. Sorry, I mean night 3, night 4. And then they attack the Recluse. How do you feel about signaling that the Fangu has jumped by killing the Recluse? Still two outsiders they can potentially jump to.
Does that tick the mathematician? I think it does.
Yes, it would.
Yeah, I would say that it does. It was an outsider misregistering as not an outsider, so that the Fangu doesn't jump when they should have. So the Fangu ability didn't work abnormally. Yeah, I would absolutely do that sometimes. I wouldn't do it every single time, but I would absolutely do that every once in a while, depending on when exactly in the game it is.
Cool. All right.
And also, as Molobok said, only when there's still lots of jumps left. If the other outsiders have been executed and it's the Fangu's only way out, maybe don't.
Yeah,
maybe just let the jump happen.
Yeah, I agree. Okay, before we move on to our next script, last check. Anything else on this one?
No, I think we've pretty much hit all of it.
Sure. Then before we go on to our next script, I got a message from you last night or this morning or at some point that said, where is it? Something along the lines of
it's when we were talking. If you're about to say what I think you're about to say,
I almost certainly am.
Which means that it wasn't in a message.
It wasn't in a message.
No, I said it out loud unless you're going to say something else.
Oh, no, you're right. It's not a message. You said something along the lines of, I think I'm going mad, but I've put a heretic script as one of my... I've only looked through a third of them, but I put a heretic script as one of my favourites. So let's have a look at that. This is our other Fangu script.
Yeah.
And you like this one more than the previous one? And
yeah.
Do you want to quickly sum up what you like about this script?
So, I mean, it shares a lot in common with, the other script that we just looked at. It has a thing that is a role that would die in the night. It's got the Raven Keeper. It has an Oracle, which can help detect things like when the jump happened. It has a Juggler, which we spoke about as having a potential issue with the singular demon, but it's also got the Recluse to balance that. But basically, any of the issues that might have come up with some of those abilities being like, wow, a Juggler on a solo demon script is pretty strong, are entirely balanced by the fact that there's a heretic here.
Sure. And
that the heretic can be jumped to.
Yeah, that's always the fun thing about Fangu Heretic, and it's a large part of why several games of Martian Vampires have been so interesting. With either Fangu jumps to heretics or the potential for Fangu jumps to heretics.
Yep. And there's also a Scarlet Woman here, so that can also help for, the fact of like, if a Flower Girl or a Juggler finds a Fangu early, it might be fine because there's a Scarlet Woman. The Scarlet Woman also means that it's a little bit harder for the demon to just kill themselves in the night if there is a heretic, if there's a Scarlet Woman in play, because they'll do the Scarlet Woman jump first and then they'll have to try it again the next night. But maybe they don't have time because you have to kill, like the Scarlet Woman will, turn off at a certain point. So If you do that Scarlet Woman pass late in the game, maybe you don't fully have time to decide whether you believe the heretic and should kill yourself or not. So you've got the Fengu that can jump to an outsider and also a Scarlet Woman, so you can have like a couple of different demon hops going on here. And again, all of this I think with a heretic is actually like really interesting. And I am not quiet about the fact that I don't like heretic as a role. I don't really like playing with it. It feels a lot like it's just a bit of a coin flip in a way that doesn't feel very good for me. So most of the time I avoid it. But sometimes you have to recognize that like heretic can do interesting things on a script that is sort of designed with a heretic in mind. And I think that this has been. It's got one way for the game to end early, which is a saint, and that puts it in town's hands. I think one thing that happens on a lot of heretic scripts is that people try to max out all the different like conditional game enders, and I think that's actually less interesting. I think maybe having like one way for there to be an alternate win or loss condition to happen on a heretic script is interesting, but once you start trying to put all of them in, it starts becoming a little bit of like the other things where you try to max out this one thing to the heights of everything. It just kind of feels like a little bit much. Sure. And yes, the Baron jinx with heretic is that the Baron might only add one outsider instead of two. This is to help prevent the evil team knowing guaranteed that there's a heretic in play, which in this script is also helped with the fact that there's 5 outsiders on the script instead of just the 4. But I think that jinx is interesting too.
Yeah. We should, of course, explain both of the jinxes. You've just done that one. The other one is that Fangu Scarlet Woman, when the Fangu dies to its own ability, the Scarlet Woman doesn't become another demon.
Yeah, this is to prevent there being two active demons in play at the same time, which is obviously not the intent of the Scarlet Woman.
Which is excellent, and the Zombies should look at that.
Yes.
But yeah, we've got... how do you feel about Saint with Fangu as a combination? Because the Saint the Saint really doesn't want to be executed, and might say so.
Yeah.
Do you think that there's a risk that it kind of comes down to a crapshoot late game as to whether or not the Saint has been Fangu jumped?
I mean, isn't that kind of what it's like in Trouble Brewing as well? Was that Saint claim real, or are they just a demon pretending? Or were they a minion who took a Saint bluff and then got Star Pass too, or Scarlet Woman jumped? Like, I don't think it's necessarily any different than Saint in its home script and having to decide whether you believe that or not.
I think the biggest difference there is that the Saint is always going to be... Sorry, the player bluffing Saint and TB is always going to be evil. So they're going to be pinging empaths, they're going to be pinging potentially investigators or fortune tellers.
True.
Whereas here, they're never going to ping an investigator. They're never going to ping the seamstress. They might be confirmed by a juggler. And then it's just late game. What are you going to...
Yeah, it depends on when the jump happens. I mean, if you have a Slayer who holds on to their ability for long enough, they might be able to test that. If you have a Flower Girl, they're alive later in the game, they might be able to get some information that can tell them where a jump possibly went to, right? So I think there's ways on the script for this to be checked without it being like always just a crapshoot. But I do agree, Saint is a little bit on the sort of like, do we trust the claim or not? But again, you also have a heretic, so I think it adds just a layer.
Yeah. You've got the Fangu and the Scarlet Woman abilities, which both move the demon. How do you feel about the Choir Boy with a demon that can move?
So, I will say that you are always learning the player who is currently the demon at the time that the king dies, which means that, you might have only one day to act upon that information. So I think that there is a a very strong incentive for you as a choir boy to, when you get your information, just immediately come out. And I think that's true anytime a choir boy gets information. But I think that might be especially true when we're looking at a demon who might be able to move.
You've got the
And then again, there's still the heretic here that needs to be into consideration,
Yeah.
right? I'm the choir boy and I know exactly who the demon is. Fuck, do I think there's a heretic? I don't know.
Yeah. And that, I think that's going to vary from game to game. Again, whether that's something that's interesting, and also group to group, whether that's something that's interesting or something that feels like a lottery. But I think I do like this script. I've said a lot that's like, what about this thing? But I want to be absolutely clear that I do like this script a lot.
Yeah.
I've not had a look at my notes for this. Here we are. You've also got the king with the poisoner, which can be a bit of an unfortunate combination, because it's not as unfortunate as with a character that can straight up kill the king, because you can you can execute the poisoner by mid to late game. But the king receiving poisoned info can be like, the poisoner knows exactly who to poison by mid to late game.
Yeah.
Of course, you've got the investigator who can maybe see that there is a poisoner in the game and deal with it before it becomes an issue. You've got the Raven Keeper who might be able to track down a poisoner. But it's you're kind of playing the king, which a lot of people, with good reason, consider to be a fairly weak character anyway, and playing that off against I don't even have any idea whether I should be trusting my information or not.
Right.
I'm not sure that's great.
I think how much that is enjoyed is going to definitely vary from person to person.
That's the common refrain of this this week, I think.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, if the Fengu is a Scarlet Woman, then they just kill the king immediately. Yeah, sure, that could be a strategy where they're like, great, even if there's a choir boy and I'm found out, it's fine. I get executed, the game continues.
Yeah.
And then a heretic may or may not be going into ultimate panic mode. Because they're like, oh god, our choir boy has the demon found out immediately, but I can't come out with the fact that I'm the heretic because, like,
Yeah.
What if there's a Scarlet Woman and then we just lose?
Just showing the king the heretic on the first night they can learn info and just being like, hey king, what did you get? King? So there's a Fengu in play.
Hey king, what did you get? Fengu?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's the, I think that, from the notes that I took when I was looking through it, I think King Choir Boy was my biggest red flag on the script. We do have our favorite Recluse Slayer here with the Scarlet Woman.
Yeah.
The other note that I took was that I really like the choice of minions that we've got here. We've spoken about the Scarlet Woman already. I think that the Baron can really help out its Fengu, probably more than any other demon. And Baron's already pretty strong. Yeah. So I think I don't know. I don't really know whether the good team also have a lot of information. The good team do have a lot of information to help them figure out who is on the evil team. So I don't think that's a horrible thing. But the evil team will probably end up with an extra evil player, so that kind of balances itself out. I think that the poisoner is going to be quite hit or miss, because it could end up. It's more likely to end up doing absolutely nothing because there are more outsiders in the game. Well, that brings up the question of, oh shit, we just poisoned the heretic, and we've got, and the good team have no idea.
Yeah.
And neither did the evil team. But equally, if they can figure that out, if they can poison one of the few remaining townsfolk, that's a lot more devastating than a poisoner usually can be. I think the poisoner can potentially be quite swingy here. But the Cerenovus can pick heretic, and that's fun.
Yeah, definitely.
I think
Imagine you're Cerenovus alive going into the final three, and so you decide to just Cerenovus Madden, the only living player is the only living good player is the heretic.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Good luck nominating anybody apart from yourself.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's Cerenovus could be a little bit game breaking late game, but I think that's quite an unlikely situation overall. And I just like Cerenovus, you know. But I do think it works on the script because I think there are a lot of interesting things that the Cerenovus can do. Not just Heretic, but also make a suspicious looking player mad that they're the Saint for a couple of days and then let them get executed. I do think that Cerenovus Saint actually is the opposite way, can be a little bit of a rough combination because if you make the Saint mad that they're something other than the Saint, and then you put them on the block and they're like, I can claim to be the Saint and get executed, or I can not claim to be the Saint and get executed.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think at that point, if you're already on the block and it's pretty clear that it's going to be difficult to get you off, like you just have to, right? Because either you're going to die and the game will definitely end, or you put it in the hands of the storyteller's might ability, and maybe the game ends, but that's not any different than what it would have done before. So
yeah.
You know, like your odds there are you always just want to out at that point, and then just let the ST decide whether they're going to do a quick re-rack or they're going to let it pass for now.
Yeah, but like worst case scenario, the Cerenovus just wins the game, or the Cerenovus doesn't really have much of an ability.
Well, it doesn't have an ability with one specific player. They can do other shit.
They can, but you know, for that day, it's just not a.
It's a might ability. I think the thing with might abilities that people would have a better time playing this game accepting is that your might ability says might for a reason, and it might not work. That's why it's a might. Like, it doesn't always feel great when it doesn't. Don't get me wrong, but you are not guaranteed, and you are not automatically owed a specific way of your ability working just because you happen to be in play. Sometimes it might be better for the game for that might to not be a might, and sometimes it's better for the game that it is.
That's true, but you know, Cerenovus is a minion, and I don't know. I think it's just best to avoid that sort of situation where it's. I
mean, if I'm a Cerenovus and I've made somebody mad and they happen to be the Saint, and then they get put on the block and they out, and the storyteller decides to not execute that, I'm going to take that as a hint, and I'm going to do something else that will perhaps be better and more interesting for the game, and let the player who claimed I was Cerenovus mad and didn't get executed when I broke it, like, I'm going to let them do their own thing. And if everybody just believes that they're the Saint, then fine. You know, sometimes you make choices that might be quote unquote less optimal, but they're better and they're more interesting for the game itself, rather than every single day trying to put into the storyteller's hands this really awful feeling of, well, I either don't have a minion ability or, you know, the game just ends, which doesn't feel fun for the Saint, and it doesn't feel fun for the storyteller. So as a Cerenovus, maybe just do something fun for the game.
I agree with that, but my point is, you can avoid all of that by not putting them on a script together.
Yeah, you can. I'm not saying that you absolutely need to have a Cerenovus on this script or a Saint on this script. Like, I definitely think one of them could be swapped out, and I think that that's fine. But I also just think that if you have an ability that has a might on it, maybe don't feel so entitled to what your ability, you know, should quote unquote do. There is no should. There's what the storyteller decides, and you just have to accept it, even if it's not what you necessarily would have wanted.
Sure. What else we got to talk about? How do you feel about Investigator here with some of the minions? Because you got Investigator Scarlet Woman is often seen as being probably the strongest thing for an investigator to see in TB, but it's but even that isn't as strong and the right game as Investigator Sing and Marionette.
Right. And of course, there's a recluse here, which means that, you know, you can do something with the investigator info if you wanted. There's a poisoner who could poison them. There's a drunk that they could be. So there's enough sort of like questionability around their information that I think it works fine.
Okay. Yeah, I think that I think the last character that we really need to touch on is going to be the magician.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's unlikely for a magician to die at the night, but it's very likely for a Fangu to die in the night. Do you think that the magician really does its job here?
I suppose it depends on exactly what you think the magician's job should be. I think that it does have limited use as a result, but it depends also, like, you know, Fangu doesn't always jump right away. If the magician is alive for half the game and for half the game before the Fangu jumps, you know, the Fangu doesn't jump till halfway through the game, then for that first half of the game, the magician has potentially done something. Sometimes the magician does nothing because people just get the right reads from the start. You know, sometimes the minion knows who has to be the demon because of, I don't know, some other reason that I can't really think of right now. But I do agree with what Piranha said here. Magician basically has a timer on this script where if they want to do anything, if they want to have had any impact, it's going to have been in the early game. But I don't think that's necessarily too much different than most other magicians, where if you're doing something, it's going to be early game, and that's about it.
Okay. I like both of these.
It's maybe a little bit exaggerated on this script, but I don't think it's exaggerated so much that I would necessarily say, like, you have to change it out for something else. I think you could change it out for something else and still have, you know, an interesting role there, but, you know, it's kind of middling.
Okay. I like both of those last two scripts, both of the Fangu scripts. I think they're both good scripts. I do agree with you that this script with the Scarlet Woman and the Heretic gives a little bit more cover to the powerful characters that can detect a demon early. Mm-hmm. I am quite concerned, like I say, about... I'm not sure that the Saint fits, or the Cerenovus, but I think the Saint has a couple of other issues.
I would agree. If one of those is going to be swapped out, I would suggest that the Saint be swapped out for something else.
But I do like this script. I do like both of those two scripts. We'll talk about our final script now before we figure out which one is our favorite of them all. And this script is the Turing test, which is our Al-Hadikia script for the day. And I think we both said that this was one of our scripts that we quite like. Al-Hadikia is one of those demons that makes sense to have little friends. Not have little friends. How do you feel like this script plays with that in an interesting way?
Sorry, can you say that one more time?
How do you feel like this script plays with Al-Had in an interesting way?
Well, one thing I think that is interesting, this is maybe not specific to it being Al-Had, but specific to it being a solo demon, I'm pretty sure this might be the only script that had an engineer.
It is, yeah.
Yeah, so basically the engineer on the script, they obviously have no choice on the demon. The demon is just going to be the solo demon that's in play. It forces the engineer to do something about the minions, which I think is really interesting. And what I like about this is that I think the engineer is going to have a difficult choice to make with regards with what minions to put in play. I think all of them deal a certain amount of damage. Probably, like, if you're going to go engineer, you might put a spy in because that's maybe the least impactful, but like then you still have to make a choice about one of the other minions if you're in a 2-minion game. And it's quite difficult because, yeah, sure, you as Emma said, spy goblin, great. Well, now you have a demon claiming goblin, and you as an engineer know that you put a goblin in play. So how are you going to tell that from the actual goblin? And it's literally going to be like a 50-50 flip at the end if you have 2 players claiming goblin. Yeah. Or you have the goblin make the purposeful choice to not claim goblin and just let that demon ride that claim out, right? So there's all kinds of dilemmas that come with the engineer on the solo script with the particular minions that are given here, that they all have the potential to be pretty devastating.
Yeah, I think that the engineer does have quite an interesting choice. It's also not like any of the minions are particularly loud, because the engineer's one of the engineer's biggest weaknesses is when it's paired with minions that are obviously in play, like Fearmonger or even worse, the Psychopath.
Yeah.
And the engineer can just go, "Hey everyone, I put a Psychopath in play last night," or "I took a Psychopath out of play last night," and then you execute the person who's been killing people, and yeah, they just die. I mean, there are ways around that with a Pit Hag in particular, but it's there's none of that on this script. I should also say that this script came with a note of a custom rule. We don't typically run script competition scripts with custom rules because they are like it's kind of tricky to keep that in mind. But it is only fair that I mention it. If we pick the script, whether we would run it with it is something that we would have to discuss, because like I say, we don't typically. But it is your custom rule, your homebrew jinx, that a Philo that chooses to gain the ability of the bounty hunter creates an evil player if there isn't already one in play. Or an evil townsfolk if there isn't already one in play.
Yeah, I for one like my jinx. Is that not jinx? my house rule. That's why it's my house rule.
We should also go over the other jinxes. The lunatic. If the Al-Hadikia picks different players to the lunatic, the mathematician learns that the lunatic's ability worked abnormally. If the spy and the magician are in play, the magician and the demon's tokens are removed from the Grim when the spy sees it, and the Pit Hag cannot create an evil politician. Those are the rules for the those are the jinxes on the script. How do you feel about Pit Hag with the politician and the magician? The Pit Hag can very, very easily find out who their demon is by trying to turn either the magician or the demon into a politician. And then if they get told no, they know that that player was the demon and the other player would have been the magician. Unless, of course, you have a bounty hunter turned magician. In case, that's fine.
So I think it depends on how you choose to run that. The way that I read that jinx is that you can also choose to run that as the Pit Hag's ability just fizzling. You pick a player, you choose politician, and you don't actually answer anything. You just put the Pit Hag back to sleep so that they cannot tell the difference between the magician and the demon that way. They don't know whether it's fizzled or whether it worked.
We have a few people saying that we have Piranha saying that Pit Hag and Politician aren't a great combination, and we have Emma saying that Politician and Bounty Hunter aren't a great combination. We do have the potential, of course, for 2 extra evils here. The Bounty Hunter and the Politician. Is that a combination that you don't like, or that you pay any mind to?
I mean, I definitely think that it's something to pay mind to. These are 2 roles: one that guarantees a player will be of an evil alignment when they normally wouldn't be, and one which is variable depending on the context and who pulls the token. There are some people who, if they pull politician, they will always 100% just be playing for evil right till the end of the game, even if evil is on a sinking ship, because why not? You don't really lose a whole lot that way. I guess at worst you lose the game and because you evil won and you didn't flip, but meh. I find a lot of times politicians do sort of get snuffled out a little bit, not always, but it often gets narrowed down to, like, I think one of you is evil and I think the other one is the politician, and that can be helpful. But yeah, I definitely think that when you have more than one alignment changer on a script, you absolutely need to be keeping that in mind when you are crafting your game, to think about what is actually fair and balanced to put in.
Sure. Um, yeah, I think there's always going to be that element of storyteller control, but I think that for most scripts, I don't think there's ever really, or most good scripts, I don't think there's ever really two characters that you shouldn't put in play together. Like there might be a combination of 5 or 6 characters that can be a little bit broken if you put all of them in, but I think that 2 or 3 characters, any 2 or 3 characters, it should be able to build a pretty balanced game around.
I mean, I think that that is a valid viewpoint, and those viewpoints tend to skew towards you should only have one alignment changer and one alignment changer only ever on a script, which is fair. I absolutely think that that is a perfectly reasonable way of looking at custom scripts. I personally think that custom scripts can, like, most of them are going to have this anyway because no custom script is going to be like perfect, but I think that you can get away with it in custom scripts where you have some roles that like maybe don't play quite as well together when they're both in the script, but they're serving different like purposes of a sort, and a way that they can be sort of played around. Like if you have all of the townsfolk alignment changers, then yeah, you might have an issue there because you have so many townsfolk that you need to put into play. If you have all of the outsider alignment changers all together, then yeah, that's maybe an issue. But if you have like one townsfolk alignment changer and one outsider alignment changer, I think that allows for being able to be more picky about which one is going in play. And so the question of the game can become, so we might have one extra evil, but is it coming from a politician who's playing, or is it coming from a bounty hunter who turned, and maybe not necessarily from both? And part of the puzzle is sorting out which one it is. I don't think there's anything necessarily wrong with that, although I do agree that it is more limiting to the script that has to deal with that.
Okay. How do you feel about Lunatic seeing the Alhadikia on the script?
I will say I'm not the biggest fan of Lunatic Alhad, so of the outsiders, that's one that I would, the one that I would change.
We had. I think that the Lunatic who sees the Alhad kind of can afford to go with those picks, almost whoever they are, because you can always just choose to live if they pick you or a minion.
Yeah, but if you choose to live and the others choose to live, then you're
it's
just
a risk for sure.
But yes, yeah, you can choose to go for the risk, sure.
So we had a couple of Alhad scripts, including one that didn't quite put it on our list of scripts to talk about, called Minenfeld, but a honorable mention to that script.
Wait, wasn't it just Minefield?
I think it was Minenfeld. Not the point. That script had a few more characters.
You're right, it is Minenfeld. I just can't read
German Minefield. That script had a few more characters that can survive being picked by the Alhad.
I auto-translated it.
I did it first as well until I read it a few times, and I was like, no, that's not in English. But that script had a few more characters that can survive choosing to die. How do you feel about characters that can survive choosing to die, as it were? Like, we've got Innkeeper and Sailor on this one. They can be picked by the Alhadikia, choose to die, and live anyway. Be forced to live. Do you think that Innkeeper is a townsfolk on the script?
Yeah, so this is my hot take on Alhadikia, that things that cause night protection on Alhad scripts, not the greatest. They can hard prove themselves. That is the one benefit, is that they are potentially able to hard prove themselves as the role that they are claiming. The downside is that you might be killing a whole bunch of people in the process who otherwise would not have died. So it's a bit of a trade-off. I can accept maybe one role that could cause that player to either themselves not die or for other players to not die. But anything beyond that, and this is, I think, part of why I liked this one a little bit better than the other one, is the other one had more a lot more of no death in the nights, which I think often is. It feels real bad to be that player. Like I've been a soldier in an Al Hadiki game, and I spent the whole game going like, well, fuck, no matter what I pick, I might be killing off 2 other people along with me, and that doesn't feel good. I feel like a liability to my own team. Innkeeper has a little bit more play with it because they're choosing 2 other players instead of just and the demon doesn't know necessarily who you're picking, whereas if you're a soldier, like it's you, and they know that they can just pick you over and over. So I think Innkeeper is okay, but I'm wary of too much like protection rolls on Alhad scripts. I'm wary of any protection rolls, frankly, on Alhad scripts. To be fair, this one also does have Sailor, so the Sailor can have the same potential issue, but a Sailor might also drunk themselves, and that's up to the ST to decide. But it's and also, as Molobok points out, have seen Innkeepers accidentally lose the game multiple times because maybe you chose a minion on the same night that the demon chose themselves and the minion was supposed to die, but now they can't, and so the game just ends.
Yeah, I mean, Kat was in chat earlier. You're here. Kat is in chat.
Yeah,
hey,
Kat's
Kat.
still in chat.
Yeah, sorry about that one, Kat.
You were evil with us too. You turned from Nikki the mess.
You picked me the day before, Kat. I got resurrected the day before, and then I picked them as Epheles. And you picked them as Epheles, and yourself. Sorry about that.
Yeah, it was Nikki. Nikki was the mez. I was the psychopath who psychopath killed you.
Yeah. And then I came to you the day after and said, "Hey, so who are your minions?" And you're like, "I'm not telling you." I was like, "It's Nikki, isn't it? The Epheles." It was like, "Oh, did I kill the evil player?" Yeah, you did.
Yeah. That's fine. I mean, you weren't evil at the time that I killed you. You were just going to turn evil.
Yeah. And also, you got to kill me, so it's fine.
Yeah.
that was an unfortunate game. Sorry for costing you the game there, Kat.
It's fine. Yeah, as Kat says, it was funny.
It was funny, but yeah, Innkeeper. You can have an evil Innkeeper because of the bounty hunter, but you can't have a mess turned evil Innkeeper who knows their teammates here.
Yeah.
So that's not going to happen on this script, but you do still run into that sort of issue. Potentially. That's the Innkeeper being a super townsfolk.
Yeah.
All right. The question I always like to ask when I see a philosopher on a script: is there anything on the script that is an obvious choice for the philosopher to take?
I'm
not sure there is.
Think so. I will say this script does have Balloonist, which suffers some of the same issues as we had talked about on a previous script with Balloonist. It's a potentially multiple killing demon, although it's a little bit more outside of the demon's hands, so you might stand a better chance at getting your information there. But there's also a poisoner, there's a spy and a recluse who could mess with your info that you don't have control over. So I think questionable how I would feel as a balloonist here. But I think almost everything else is viable. We've spoken already about the custom rule that I have with Bounty Hunter and Philosopher to make that the not just entirely obvious choice with no downside.
Yeah. That would be. Other than that, are you looking at Fortune Teller? Are you looking at day 3 or day 2 chef so that you can compare notes and make sure the chef isn't lying? Are you looking at a fisherman or even an engineer to really mess with the evil team?
Yeah, and get a second use of those, once per game abilities.
Yeah. Or are you going to go Amnesiac and make the storyteller want to punch you in the face?
Okay, so there's some people asking what my house rule for Bounty Hunter is. So I have a house rule. Well, actually, I have 2 house rules for Bounty Hunter and Philosopher. I'll go over either of them. Both of them, sorry. One of them I think is more a bit required than the other. So the first one is that if a Philosopher chooses to turn into the Bounty Hunter and there is not already a Bounty Hunter in play, meaning that there's no evil townsfolk, I will turn a townsfolk evil that night. That's because the townsfolk being evil is a balancing aspect of the bounty hunter's incredibly strong ability to just flat out learn evil players. And I think if you're if you don't do that setup aspect, then there's absolutely no downsides to a philo going bounty hunter, and that is always the optimal choice for them, because there's either a bounty hunter in play and it's fine, the impact has already happened, or there's not, and you get all the positives with none of the negatives. So that's my house rule for that, first and foremost, that I would say is almost required for these to not just be broken. The other house rule that I do is if you are the philosopher who themselves has been turned evil by the bounty hunter, I don't allow you to get the bounty hunter ability, because that is also, again, just very incredibly straightforward. Like, yeah, I just drunk the bounty hunter that I happen to know is exactly in play, which I think is... You don't have to do it, because as a storyteller, you can choose to give that drunk bounty hunter true information if you want, whenever you want. So it's not 100% required, but I generally find it more interesting to just disincentivize the player from doing the obvious play.
Yeah, it is worth saying, of course, that we don't typically run with house rules because mainly because we can't expect people to know. It gives an advantage to people who know us particularly well if they know exactly what house rules we would put in. So typically we don't consider that, but if it was included in the message that we got, so I thought I would read it, but we kind of have to consider it both with and without that. So without that, Bounty Hunter is clearly the obvious choice. This script also has the not fun workaround of Pit Hag turning themselves into a philo and gaining the politician ability, but I like to trust my players that they wouldn't do that, because that's just not fun.
Yeah, that's the interesting thing is that there's not like so okay, I understand why there's not a jinx here, and that is because they don't want to get into jinxes that require multiple player or multiple roles. But I personally will rule that a Pit Hag can't just use their own ability to get around a direct link jinx by doing it indirectly. So like I would tell a Pit Hag, if you choose to make yourself into the evil philosopher, I'm still not going to allow you to gain that politician ability, because you're clearly just attempting to circumvent the jinx that is in place. And I don't allow jinx circumvention. It's rules as written, hard rules as written. Sure, that jinx doesn't exist, that an evil philo can turn themselves into the evil poly, but like, nah.
Yeah, I agree with you in principle, but again, house rules, we don't tend to look at them when judging scripts.
Yeah. Well, the fun thing is that this is one that
I will say that, again, like I said earlier, I don't expect most of the people who play with us at least to do that, because I think everybody knows that that's just not a fun or interesting thing to do.
Yeah, which is what I was just about to say. I forget to mention this fact quite a lot. I will answer it as a question if or when it comes up when players ask it, but I often just forget to like say it ahead of time. And I have never once in my life seen a Pit Hag try to do that. I had it asked as a question like once before, but I've never seen anybody do that.
Yeah.
Even though I'm sure everybody is smart enough to figure out that that is technically a play. Or turning the other one is Pit Hagging yourself straight into a cult leader when you're between two good players. That's also one that I just generally will tell a Pit Hag, like, nah, you can't do that's not fucking fun.
And do it with a
don't
goon
do that
as well.
Yeah, you could do it with a goon as well. But people don't do it because it's not fun.
Yeah.
It is optimal, sure, but it's not fun. And it's not nice to your fellow players on your team who are already on, generally speaking, if you're a Pit Hag in play, it means you are on the minority team. So,
I've also never seen anybody do anything like that. The closest that I have seen, I've mentioned this before, but I'll mention it again because why not, was a Fangu, after a barber got executed, intentionally swapped themselves with the snake charmer so that they could become the good Fangu, because at that time I was running it that barber acts immediately, which meant that they could just swap themselves back with the old snake charmer, now evil Fangu, and now good Fangu, and become the good Fangu and kill themselves in the night. Didn't work because it was a philo snake charmer, which was very funny. But I think that's the closest I've seen to somebody abusing that sort of rule loophole.
Yeah, and I've also seen people come up with that aspect before as well, of like, oh yeah, I could use a barber to do this and then that, and then just like win. And and purposefully like decide, no, I am not going to do that, because I don't think that's very nice or fun to my fellow players, and I would like my fellow players to have a good time.
Yeah. But that's kind of beyond the scope of this script, because I'm not hugely worried about people doing that.
Yeah.
I'm not sure that... I suppose the only outsider that a Philo would be likely to take here would be the politician, because there are certainly players who will do that.
Mm-hmm.
As a pit hag, what shenanigans would you get up to on this script?
So I think, like, obviously the pit hag can't change the demon type or who the demon is, which means that your shenanigans here are likely to be playing around with the outsider stuff. Working with the demon to create a sweetheart on a night and hopefully they die, or you putting a politician into play if there's not one already. Which means that if you are a storyteller who's going, I'm putting the bounty hunter in on purpose and not the politician, and you put a pit hag in, you're probably just fucking your own ideas there. So keep that in mind. Sure. Changing somebody into a lunatic, because even though they'll be able to figure out that they're just the lunatic, at the very least, it takes out a townsfolk ability. Turning somebody into the drunk, like, and that's more or less your biggest things here. Maybe turning somebody into a fisherman to hope that the ST will give them like not super game solving information instead of maybe a fortune teller, for example. Give yourself a budget poisoner and a sailor. I don't know. Like there's some stuff that a pit hag could get up to, but to be honest, I think for sure pit hag loses some of its functionality on a solo demon script, because part of the pit hag is a bit of an escape hatch, right? By being able to turn another player into the demon should your demon be in getting some heat there. So I think if I were going to change something in the minions on the script, I would probably suggest a pit hag into something different.
How do you feel about turning the pit hag into a widow? Not like removing it and replacing it with a widow, but as the pit hag, turning yourself into a philosopher and then drunking whoever you want to. Like you could do that. How would you feel about a pit hag turning themselves into the Philo and drunking the bounty hunter intentionally? Because then they're using their entire ability to do it, and also they can't do it on the first night.
Right, yeah. The fact that they can't do it on the first night, I think, is meaningful there. And again, when you have a drunk or poisoned like player, that doesn't guarantee that they are getting false information. So if you feel for the balance of the game that you need to give this bounty hunter true info, even though they're currently being evil Philo bounty hunter drunked, it can be balancing based on how the storyteller chooses to run it. So I think it's fine as long as the pit hag is like goes into it with the understanding that I see what you're doing. I am probably going to honor this most of the time, but keep in mind that I may not, because I might decide for the balance of the game that evil is just absolutely fucking, smashing it, and maybe I need to do something to give good a little bit of help.
Yeah. Kat is suggesting creating an evil amnesiac. Emma is suggesting creating an evil snake charmer or Philo snake charmer.
Yeah, for sure. I definitely think that there's things for pit hags to get up to. I just think that one of the main functionality points of a pit hag is that escape hatch, and when you're on a single demon script, I guess you can make that in the evil snake charmer. That is a way to make this the escape hatch whomever you want. But of the evil team, of course, but it just loses a little bit in that. I'm not saying it definitely need to get swapped out, but if I were going to change out any of the minions, it might be the pit hag.
Yeah. I think I broadly agree with that. What does the mathematician do here? It spots the sweetheart, the recluse, the poisoner, and the spy. And the sailor.
Yes. The lunatic. Did you say lunatic?
And also the lunatic with the jinx. Yeah, you're right.
Yeah. So the mathematician could certainly verify a lunatic claim if they're, if the lunatic is claiming my choices aren't being followed. Then the math could say, yeah, my number agrees with that.
Yeah.
So that
But
could be
also
helpful.
but it's also not guaranteed to be the case because there are plenty of other things that could be going
Right.
wrong.
Yeah, absolutely. There's definitely the misregistration of the recluse and the spy being, let's see, so that could affect on night one, that could affect the chef. On various nights it could affect the bounty hunter.
Fortune teller,
Just
balloonist.
drummer, yes but don't. Yeah, fortune teller, balloonist.
Yeah.
Can't, depending on what you're doing with the amnesiac ability, maybe the amni. Maybe a fisherman as well, but I would say I would really, really strongly suggest that a storyteller not do that to fishermen. But
Yeah, I mean, there's a question about whether that's the case because it's whether you can do that with a fisherman because the fisherman doesn't learn any information, and it's kind of like the same thing as with the general. Like the storyteller cannot. Like, the recluse can't misregister to the storyteller. So, like, if you are quote unquote misregistering it to the fisherman, are you really giving good advice that you know?
Here's the thing. Fisherman is vortoxable, which proves that in some fashion it is considered information. And here's what I think about that. If for the way that misregistration would work with a fisherman is basically you register the recluse as the demon, and now all of a sudden your advice on what the team needs to do to win can change very drastically because you're saying, well, the demon, the actual demon isn't the demon, the recluse is the demon as far as this fisherman is concerned, and you give them advice about, you know, what the game would look like if you're trying to tell them that they need to execute the recluse actually.
I mean,
so I think that you absolutely can allow the recluse or even potentially spy misregistration to affect the fisherman. Like the way it would work with spy might be the spy is bluffing a specific townsfolk role, and you tell the fisherman, hey, you should find and trust insert townsfolk role that the spy is misregistering as. Right? Like just very straightforward fisherman advice there.
Yeah.
But you know, you can definitely do that. I think most of the time you probably shouldn't, but you can.
Yeah. Yeah, I think we've pretty much covered everything here. Unless there's something else you want to bring up, of course.
I don't think anything in particular. I think we mentioned balloonist having maybe some of the same issues, slightly mitigated by the deaths not being entirely in the Owlhead's choices. Mathematicians probably could be something else, which we just touched upon.
Balloonist does still have to contend with a spy, potentially with a poisoner or a pit hag.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. All right then. In which case, let's talk about some of these scripts then. I think that the biggest weaknesses that we could see on this one were potentially Sailor and Innkeeper, potentially Lunatic, potentially Bounty Hunter Feeler without the house rule. Is that fair? All right. Whereas some of the biggest strengths on the script include the engineer has an interesting choice to make. With the house rule, there's no dominant strategy for the Philo. What else we got? The good team have quite a lot of characters that would probably choose to stay alive, generally speaking, which can make it interesting for the Alhad, although perhaps not quite as many as I would like. There's a risk of 2 extra evils, but it's you can play around it, and we've got some. I suppose it kind of links in with what I was saying about the engineer, but some interesting minions. Any other strengths or weaknesses you want to bring up on the script?
Nothing that we haven't already talked about.
Let's highlight everything because we're going to look at all of the scripts now. We might as well do it in reverse order because we're here.
But we just did.
I know, but like summary.
But we just did.
Okay, fine. Let's move on to the previous script, Heritage and Heresy. weaknesses of this script. Well, the strengths of the script are that it is a script. It's quite easy to find the Fangu early, but if that does happen, the evil team have escape routes in the Heretic and the Scarlet Woman. There's both teams have some interesting options to play around it. There are a couple of helpful jinxes on the script. The minions are interesting, with the exception of one of our weakness, which is Serenovus and Saint can be, however you end up doing it, it can be not great for somebody. And I don't love King Choir Boy on it. Anything else to highlight on here? In either direction? This one does have a drunk with the Fangu. It does,
yeah. I mean, I don't personally mind drunk Fangu. I know that some people don't like it, but to me, it's never been an issue.
Sure.
I actually think that, especially on a solo Fangu script, it's works better because then it, all your open-faced outsiders who may or may not eventually come out, it becomes very obvious that, oh, great, you're our jump target choices. But when you have a drunk, anybody could have been the jump.
Yeah, I agree.
Which is fun.
Turncoats is quite a similar script to Heritage and Heretics, or Heritage and Heresy, I should say, in some ways, but also quite different in others. There are, in terms of its strengths, it doesn't have, compared to the previous script, I think that it has a lot of the same strengths as the previous script. It has interesting options for the Fangu, with the Recluse being something that the other script doesn't have, that you can do interesting things with as a storyteller. I think that, but also that might not feel great for the Recluse, depending on who you play it with. It doesn't have any of the glaring weaknesses, in my opinion, of the previous script, but I don't think it also reaches the same strengths as the previous script. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, that sums up my feelings pretty much.
Yeah. So I think that if you want a more reliable, slightly more stable Fangu script, you want to go with Turncoats, whereas if you want something that has the potential to kick it up that extra level, but with also the potential to not be great for everybody who plays the game, the Heretic script, the Heritage and Heresy might be the one.
I think that's accurate.
2-for-1 special has, and what did we say in favor of this one? It has against this one, we'll start there. The Goon is probably going to be evil for most of the game. It has a couple of characters that kind of double up on the same thing, but in its favor, the Gossip makes sense here. The Professor can resurrect a spy, which is great. The Damsel in a short game can be interesting, and provides an interesting thing for the evil teams to figure out, and also Damsel Spy is an interesting interaction. The Balloonist probably might not be the happiest. Anything I missed in either side?
Nothing in particular, I don't think.
Okay. In that case, we'll move on to script number 2, Oops, All Drunks, which is an interesting script that has a lot of good characters that cause drunkenness and no evil characters that poison, which is something that a lot of people have tried to do, but this one kind of makes it work. Most of the drunkenness is traceable, but there is a lot of it, so you're going to be playing quite a lot of the social game. But there are still a couple of characters that are a little bit too good for the good team compared to what I would like, namely the Moonchild, Dreamer, and Empath, and Gossip. And a couple of and one character in particular, the Mezephiles, that's a little bit strong for the evil team. Was that the script? No, that was the script. Yeah, the Mezephiles is fine on the script. Empath is actually kind of interesting with the Empath on the script. But yeah, this is a script that I think is the floor for something great to build off of.
Absolutely, yeah. There's a lot of really interesting and strong foundation here, and I think it just needs a few tweaks here and there.
Anything else to add on it?
Nope.
Okay. And the first script we talked about, Intention, was a script that had a lot of reasons why a Poe would avoid a triple kill, which is kind of essential if you're going to build a Poe game, to make it
sure.
To make the ones that it could also be, like, you have to have either none or a lot of them. And this one has Scarlet Woman, Mastermind, Snake Charmer, Exorcist, Goon, a good number of reasons why that might be the case. With it being quite hard to tell them apart. In most cases, I think. This is the one, though, that suffers from potentially too many evil players. And yeah, a little bit of a double up in some of the characters on both teams, but nothing that's game breaking. And I think that it's a pretty well balanced script that just has. The Goon is also probably going to be evil most times on this one.
Right. Yeah.
So, with that review, what do you think are our leading candidates for script of the competition?
I think Heritage and Heresy is obviously up there.
Yeah. I'm worried about the flaws with this script. Like, this script has... I think that at its best, this is the best script. But at its worst, I think it's one of the potentially most feels bad scripts of the
I think
that
depends a lot on how you feel about Heretic, and a lot on how you feel about Heretic Saint Fengu specifically as a combo.
Yeah.
But I agree with Molbach. The floor of Heretic will always be pretty low. I think that's just a function of the Heretic.
Maybe. Which one was it? Going through the recap there, I quite like Intention. And I quite like 2 for 1 Special, which were two of the ones that I didn't expect to come out on top after my first quick review of them.
Yeah, so I would say that I would put Heritage and Heresy and Intention in probably my top 2, and then a third would be it would be up between the Turing Test and 2 for 1 Special.
I also quite like the Turing Test. I don't know. I think my feelings on Heritage and Heresy are going into it, that was the ones I expected to be the one that I liked the most. But looking at it a little bit more carefully, there are some things that did end up ringing quite a lot of alarm bells. So I think that Intention from those two, and again, I didn't expect this, but I think that is the one that I personally would go with out of those 2 scripts.
Okay. I mean, I'm certainly happy with that.
Yeah, I think that we are probably going to say that from that then, that Intention is our script winner. I will try and find out who it is that wrote that. And I think that we can each choose one runner-up. I assume yours then is going to be Heritage and Heresy? Yeah. And I am going to go with... Yeah, I'll go with 2 for 1 Special. So if we get a chance tomorrow, if you're able to join us for games 2 and potentially 3, we'll try and run through those 3 scripts. But congratulations to... Who wrote Intention? Is it... Where was it submitted? Was it submitted to me by DM?
I believe it was by DM.
By DM. If you wrote it, then feel free to say in chat now, because otherwise I'm going to have to go through quite a few DMs.
I can't help you there.
No, I know. All right, well, 2 for 1 Special, which is my runner-up, was written by Lyphoon. So congratulations, Lyphoon, on a silver medal. Your choice was Heritage and Heresy, which I believe was Piranhas.
Piranha, and it looks like Flying Ludicolo is
Ludicolo.
our script author for Intention.
Thank you very much, Flying Ludicolo. Yep. This is our script of the competition. Thank you very much for submitting it. We look forward to running it tomorrow, although I hope, Flying Ludicolo, that you will be able to join us for a game tomorrow if you are able to make the start time of 8 o'clock in the Central European time zone, 7 o'clock UK time, 2 o'clock Eastern. If you are, we would love to have you join us to run that script. I will be playing it or running it depending on how many people we have available. And then we will follow that with either Navian and I or the script authors, namely Lyfoon and Piranha, to run their scripts for the second and third game. Hopefully, we will be able to have Navian tomorrow. During that stream, by the way, we had subs from Lyra and Piranha, so thank you very much to both of you. I appreciate your support very much. But yeah, congratulations to everybody who... Well, thank you very much, first of all, to everybody who submitted a script. There were plenty of other really good scripts that we had to narrow it down to 6 scripts, or this would be going on forever. But by no means were there no more scripts that we could have talked about.
Yeah, absolutely.
There were several scripts that I wanted to talk about that we just decided not to, and a couple of scripts I think that Navian would have included that we didn't get to talk about just because we had to restrict it to half a dozen or we'd be here forever. But it's possible that we missed a brilliant script. But we are grateful to everybody who submitted scripts, and we hope that you will do so again next time we run a script competition. I have an idea for a script competition, but it'll be in a couple of months, I'm sure, because we have we have at least one stream for one script notes lined up for 2 weeks from now. So we hope that you will be able to join us at, I think it's the same time, right, Navian?
Yeah, our guest has that day off work, so we can go at our usual time.
Yep, and that will be a script that I personally absolutely adore, so I'm going to be excited to run that one the day after that in a couple of Tuesdays' time. That will be Viva La Sam's extension code, which is a really good script, and also a really good person who wrote it. So looking forward to being able to talk to Sam about that one in a couple of weeks' time.
Me too.
But for now, we will be signing off here. We will be seeing you tomorrow. Well, I will be seeing you tomorrow. Hopefully, Navian will be seeing you tomorrow. Where we will be running Intention, followed by potentially those 2 scripts, Heritage and Heresy, and 2-for-1 Deal. Immediately after that. So congrats once again to Flying Ludicolo for writing that script. We will be getting off now. Navian, are you aware if you have anything waiting for you at this time?
I have no idea.
Okay. Well, thanks again to everybody who entered the competition, everybody who joined us for this discussion of scripts. We'll see you tomorrow. Have a great night. And yeah, take care.
Bye.